Hello everyone, I'm Shelley Freeman. This is my friend Nicole, and we're going to do a little talk today about linguistics and ELL students. And so this video is done in completion of an assignment for my linguistics course. And this is going to be to help classroom teachers have some helpful hints about how to help their ELL students be successful in the classroom. So Nicole and I are ELL teachers in Northern Kentucky, and we're going to discuss ELL practices, and in particular a subject that is from our local high school, and she is a newcomer. She's been in this country for just barely over a year now, and she's from Puerto Rico, Spanish-speaking student, and she's a newcomer. So our student that we're going to discuss came just during the access testing window. So the data we have is a little bit dated, but she's made progress since then. But we're going to use the data from that test to sort of create a baseline for teachers to use as instructional planning. So she has a composite score of 1.7 on the access test, and what that means is combining the domains of reading, writing, listening, and speaking. That was her overall English language proficiency. So her speaking was barely over a 1, and her writing was about a 2. So what you would expect a newcoming student into the country to be at. So to start with, we would like to tell teachers to refer to the can-do chart. Now this is a chart created by the WIDA Corporation. Let me make sure we're minding our time here. By the WIDA company, it's actually a consortium, to help teachers know what's the baseline we can expect students to be able to do when they have scores like I just described. And so this is a can-do chart, and it tells the teacher in listening, speaking, reading, and writing, these are the levels that you can use to sort of use to plan your instruction. And so it's broken down into level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 would be fairly fully proficient. So our student's speaking level was a 1, and so I would go to the speaking part of the can-do chart, and I would look at the levels. And so, for example, in this student's case, we would say that this student would be able to answer yes or no to multiple choice questions. They would be able to identify themselves, information about themselves. They would be able to name objects, the everyday objects that would be easily identifiable with vocabulary that they're in the process of learning at that stage, and they would be able to repeat words, short phrases, and memorized chunks of languages. And so this is just a good tool for teachers to be able to use to decide what can I expect this student to be able to do, because a lot of times the student's not able to verbalize what they can and cannot do, and so the teachers are kind of looking for a starting point, right?
Mm-hmm. Something I like to do with the can-do descriptors as well is WIDA has a printable version that you can print out and highlight for like a content area teacher. You can highlight the different levels in the different domains where that student is, so they're not a 1 in all domains. The teacher can see they're a 1 in speaking, but they're a 2 in writing and that sort of thing. That's highlighted for them.
Good point. Yeah, thank you.
For a quick glance.
Yeah. Okay, so another thing that you might want to look at with your ELL students is sort of their background. What is the literacy in their home language? And in this student's case, she has a solid foundation in Spanish literacy. So we can use that as a way to build a bridge, and especially as we're looking at this in the framework of linguistics, we can build a bridge for what that student knows. If we're familiar with the linguistics of her native language and the linguistics of English, then we can bridge from one to the other for her. And so it's part of the scaffolding. And so we were talking earlier, and you mentioned a great point about cognates, and particularly with this student being Spanish, there's a lot of cognates between Spanish and English. And so would you speak to that, what you were mentioning to me?
I've had some experience with students who may be struggling with the basics of spoken English, and getting a very basic introduction across is difficult, but when presented with a higher level academic text, they can comprehend some of that. A lot of those technological words, a lot of the science words are cognates between English and Spanish, and they can recognize those words and kind of have a general understanding of what's happening. And then we help them fill in the blanks, of course, with all the language that they're unfamiliar with. But those cognates are really a good place to start with higher academic language and students that are coming in with high literacy in Spanish or their native language.
Which, and approaching the designing of the instruction that's a great way to put our frame of reference and what the student can do rather than their limitations. Sometimes their social language may be at a completely different level than their academic language, of course, or they may have other factors that cause them to go through the silent period that a lot of ELLs do. And so we can't use one as the standard for the other. And so focusing on what they can do is what propels them forward, I think. Yeah.
I agree.
Thanks. So let's move on to some good practices for teachers to use who are in the classroom. And particularly this student is a high school student, and so she will have multiple teachers. And it's not one teacher who really knows that student like at, say, the elementary level or primary level. So there's a lot of content teachers who are really like, what can I do to help the students be successful in my content area? So as I touched on before, looking at their background, and the more you know about that student's background, the better. Sometimes with newcomers, we don't know a lot about their background. In this student's case, we know a fair amount, but in other cases, the student is so new to the country and really doesn't have anything to bring to us as far as literacy background. So we want to be culturally sensitive. What's the reasoning for them being here? Are they a refugee? Are they an immigrant? Are they migrant? Or do they have a lot of family in the area already? And so we want to be aware of where they're coming from and sort of why they're here and where they're going. I'm sure you've experienced the whole gamut of that,
right,
and how that affects them in the classroom.
The kids are so different. Some of the students come to us like this young girl with both her parents are here with extended family and that sort of thing, coming into a community where they're familiar and they have some supports around them, and then we have the other end of the spectrum as well, where children are coming to live with maybe a father that they haven't seen for several years and things like that. So it just depends. It's really, really important, like you said, to get to know each student individually and find out what their immediate past has been, especially, and then what their plans are. That's important too, especially for high school students, like we were talking about this student. If it kind of depends on how motivated they are to learn English. Sure. If they're going to be here for an extended period of time, or whether they're just here for 6 months and are leaving because that's what Dad's work visa is. Really important to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that helps us to be able to, again, build that bridge for them. So what other things would you say are the most important? I think that when we look at how can I help this student be successful, sometimes it can be overwhelming. You know, if this student has 0 English or in a level 1 newcomer, for example, a social studies class, what can we tell teachers in a history class to help students, or a science class to help students? What would you say to them?
My first conversation is usually relax. It's teachers take on a lot of responsibility when it comes to their students. Any student, especially an EL student, they sometimes feel like they have to teach that student English in the year that they have them.
Good point.
So talking to them about the process, that this is going to take a long time. Sometimes you can go over the second language acquisition steps with them and talk to them about what they can expect to see from the student. The can-do descriptors are great for that, to say they're here now, we would expect them to be about here towards the end of the year. They don't have to be all the way at the end by the end of the year. So that gives the teacher a little bit of, okay, I don't have to do everything right now for the student. And it helps the teacher to focus on what they can do. That we're gonna move from this step to this step to this step, I don't have to move them from beginning to end all at once.
Absolutely.
So I think that's a really important conversation to have with teachers, is that this is a long process and you're just a piece of the puzzle, and this is the piece that we're going to work on now. And so helping them to see the background of the student and get to know the student. My next advice would kind of depend on where the student is and what the student would need. For this student, I would definitely focus on academics. How can we get that student feeling like she's really participating in the class? How can we scaffold this material so that she can understand as much as she can? How can we provide resources for her to translate things and really to use her academic skills to propel herself into the classroom? As much
building
as
her confidence.
Yes, which is not 100%. It's as much as possible.
Sure. And so what you just said made me also think that I would want to tell classroom teachers that they are acquiring a lot of language through the content without necessarily being explicitly taught the linguistics of English, the register of English. And so that process, there's the debate at the high school age, can they acquire or do they have to be explicitly taught? But they do acquire a lot of English through the content. And so still focusing on the content, as you said, and not worrying so much about, am I explicitly teaching this student English instead of my content area? But go ahead and proceed with the content, and the English will be acquired.
Yes,
so.
Especially for students who come with an academic background that have formal education and things. Yes, for sure.
Absolutely. And so a final thought with working with high school age or any age ELL is just to create an environment of acceptance and that this is going to be okay. I'm here to help you. We're a team, a partnership between classroom teachers, ELL teachers, the student, and parents as much as possible. There's so many different scenarios to if parents can be involved or not. But if we create a team atmosphere and we do relax, like you said, then that student will be more successful, because if we're all so stressed out, then that impedes that student's ability to acquire. So that's what I would like to end on and say that this is doable and relax. It will happen. It happens all the time.
Yes.
And so hang in there and thank you for being willing to engage in whatever you can do to make this student successful. All around student.
Yep.
All right. So thanks, Nicole.
Thank you.